Hello, my name is Mark Mabrito. I'm from Purdue University Northwest in Hammond, Indiana. Today my presentation is going to talk about students collaborating with generative AI in the classroom. And before I begin, I'd like to first just take a moment and think about this idea of collaboration. And by that I mean we use the term collaboration, but what does it actually mean in terms of our own lives and what we do with students in a classroom? Now, as professionals, I'm sure we've all been involved in a variety of collaborative experiences, and we probably try to do it in the classroom with students. There's, of course, a lot of research that suggests this is a good thing to do. There are a lot of metacognitive benefits to using collaborative activities in the classroom, building interpersonal skills, leadership skills, that sort of thing. So as we think about collaboration, I'm not exempting myself. I'm going to define collaboration here. And I don't know about you, but when I do this with students, that is, ask them to focus in on the meaning of a word. Typically, their go-to move is to type it in Google, and you'll wind up with one or two types of responses. Either Wikipedia says or the Merriam-Webster Dictionary says. Well, I'm going to be just as shameless here, but maybe a little more old school. So let's ask the Oxford English Dictionary to define collaboration for us. And if you do that, type collaboration into Oxford English Dictionary, you get two definitions. Here's the first one. United labor, cooperation, especially in literary, artistic, or scientific work. Now, this is probably close to the way many of us think about collaboration. Of course, in modern times, we wouldn't limit it just to literature, art, or science, but the idea of working together, of cooperating. Now, in the academy, when we have successful collaborations, we usually can't wait to tell the world about it through a conference presentation or a publication of some sort. Well, let's consider the second definition for a moment of collaboration. This is a specialized definition, and it goes, traitorous cooperation with the enemy. Now, this comes to us from wartime, the idea of colluding with the enemy, of being a collaborator. Well, if you're engaged in this kind of collaboration, obviously this is something you do not want to share and make public. As we know, many wartime collaborators were either jailed or executed. So what is the point of this? Well, let me get back to the topic at hand, the idea of collaborating with generative AI in the classroom. And I think if you look at the literature that's out there today, and by literature I mean not just published literature, but informal experiences expressed in blog posts, discussions going on in social media channels among educators, I think what you'll find is a spectrum of approaches and ideologies in terms of using generative AI in the classroom. And if I had to summarize them in a nutshell, I think they'd look something like this. On the one end, you've got the folks who want to ban it altogether, generative AI, from the classroom or heavily police its use. So they're sort of on the side of the OED definition of traitorous cooperation. They see this as a negative thing. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you've got folks who want to fully integrate it into the curriculum. So they're on the side of united labor cooperation, a positive thing. Now, since it's a spectrum, of course, there's a variety of different approaches and ideologies in between those two ends. But I would suggest that either end of the spectrum is probably problematic. And I'll explain why in a moment. But first, let's consider some of the ways that folks are currently using generative AI in the classroom. And here's just a quick list from UNESCO. And what I'm interested here is not just in the description and implementation, but in that left side where they talk about the role, that red text. And I'm interested here in the language and the metaphors that are being used when they talk about generative AI in the classroom. And also I should point out this is referencing ChatGPT, but this would really apply to any kind of generative AI. So language like possibility engine, Socratic opponent, collaboration coach, study buddy, motivator. You get the sense that this is a way of looking at generative AI as kind of a personal assistant, right? Someone who's there to help you do the task, but not actually do the task, right? They're there to help you in a way that makes the task easier to do. Well, oftentimes when educators use generative AI in the classroom, one of the rationales that they give for doing so goes something like this. We are preparing students with skills for the new workplace, which sounds good in theory, but this also begs the question, are we using generative AI in the classroom in the same way it is used in the workplace? Well, let's take a look for a moment at some of the ways that generative AI is being used in the workplace. And if we look at the list here, we'll see that it's being used for things like creating content for marketing, social media, even creating real estate listings, image GAI programs being used to generate artwork, logos, used for employee training. It also has a useful function for generating code and creating SEO, search engine optimization. So the difference I see here with the workplace versus the classroom is here in the workplace, we don't see a lot of that same language of study buddy, right, or motivator or that kind of thing. More what we see here is we see GAI being viewed as a production tool, right, something to produce content. So this raises the question then, why are we concerned when students work with generative artificial intelligence? And I'll just state a couple of reasons here, and I'm probably stating the obvious, but first off, the concern that there is a lack of critical thinking. So if GAI is doing work for the student, is the student actually engaging in any kind of critical thinking? And then we have the question of authenticity, which is one of the big questions. If a student produces some sort of content with generative artificial intelligence, is that content authentic? Meaning, is it something that, if it's not solely produced by the student, can we consider it an authentic text? And then if we can get beyond these concerns, the next level of concerns really deal with assessment. So then the question becomes, if we're accepting this product that the student produced with generative artificial intelligence, what are we assessing? How are we assessing it? And why are we assessing it? Almost in a moment of frustration. Why are we even bothering to assess it? So I would like to now consider, what does it mean to collaborate with generative artificial intelligence in the classroom? And the way I'm looking at it is this sort of the positive, if you will, OED definition, using generative artificial intelligence with the intent of creating co-authored content between the student and the GAI. Now, how do we do that exactly in the classroom, taking into account all these other concerns? So how do we use generative AI as a collaborator or a co-author for a student? And what I'm going to suggest here and show in just a moment is a collaboration log that I've developed that I ask students to participate in as they're working through the process of using generative artificial intelligence. And the way I think of it is I call this process naked collaboration. Now, just as a qualifier, there's no actual nudity involved here, but I think the term naked is appropriate in this context, because what the log helps to do is it helps to lay bare the collaborative process. It leaves nothing to the imagination. So we can see exactly, by we, I mean the instructor, we can see how the student is collaborating with generative artificial intelligence, and then the student also has an understanding of what they're doing. I don't mean this as some might think, an anti-cheating device, because that's not the intent at all. It has nothing to do with cheating or preventing cheating. It has to do really with promoting critical thinking in the process of working with generative artificial intelligence. So here's a look at the log. Now, as the arrow suggests, this isn't, appears this way on the slide. It's not necessarily meant to be a linear process, but rather a recursive one. But if we look at the top there, really the starting point is define goals and expectations. So the student is considering what are the goals and expectations for collaborating with a particular GAI model or models? What challenges do they anticipate? Now, you may think, well, how are students able to answer those questions? And I would suggest no, they're not, unless you prepare them. Okay, there's a lot of heavy instructional lifting here, I would suggest. Work that has to be done on the part of the instructor. So you have to explain to students how GAI works, what are the different models, what are their limitations, that sort of thing, so they have an awareness of it. Then the next step in the process is demonstrate procedural awareness. Okay, so how will they interact with the generative artificial intelligence model? What prompts are they going to use and why? So this brings us into the area of prompt engineering and crafting. So when they determine that, and of course this also requires instructional intervention here by explaining to students what are some of the different prompts that can be used, why do we use them. So once they do that and get some initial output, it has to be assessed. So now the question becomes, what are the strengths and limitations of this output? Are there biases present? And again, the instructor would have to explain why there are biases in some of these GAI models and how that manifests itself. And then the student has to ask, how are they evaluating it? And then this leads to further prompting. Again, another round of prompting. And again, the question, how will these prompts elicit greater detail? Further down the line, when they have output that they think they can work with, the next question becomes, what changes, revisions do they want to make themselves? And what changes, revisions do they want a generative AI application to contribute, whether it's the same one they've been using or a different one. And again, once they get output here, this may lead to further prompting. At some point in the process, the student has to move beyond just the collaboration with GAI, and they have to bring in outside sources and verification. So this is where now they would consult academic and other outside sources. They would be considering here, how does this new information verify and or expand upon the existing output? And not just academic and outside sources, but then outside people as well, soliciting feedback from peers, instructor, or even another GAI model. What changes, revisions do they want to make based on that feedback? And again, this could lead back into more prompt engineering. What changes, revisions does the student want to contribute? When we get near to what they believe to be a finished product, then the question becomes, what are the publication requirements? In other words, how are they going to acknowledge and cite the contributions of GAI in this process and in this final product? What are the existing guidelines in their field? And many fields now do have guidelines for citing and acknowledging content produced in collaboration with generative artificial intelligence. Okay, so in terms of, that's the log, but in terms of assessment, I think it helps because I list here some points that would help in terms of instructor assessment, but also student self-assessment. So both the instructor is assessing what was produced in the process, but the student is doing that as well. And I should point out that, I would create actual rubrics based on this for specific assignments, but these are just general points. So did the student, as evidenced by the log and the content produced, which we now have a record of, did they demonstrate or understand the potential limitations of using generative artificial intelligence? Did they create effective prompts? Did they effectively assess the quality of those interactions? Did they understand the role and support that they provided to the Collaborative Act, and did they understand the role and support that was provided by generative artificial intelligence? Did they not just stay there, but did they extend the collaboration beyond themselves and GAI and solicit feedback from peers, instructor, others? Did they produce and present the content according to either the assignment or discipline-specific conventions, which included accurately attributing and citing GAI? And did they do this all while engaging in thoughtful and deliberate self-reflection? Now, you might wonder, well, why? Why do this? Because it does seem like a time-consuming task, and in part it is. But I would say that it's a useful process to have students do. And the reason why is because it develops a mindfulness about generative artificial intelligence. It, more importantly, protects against what I call this phenomena that I see students engaging in today, the idea of this plug and puke model. So in other words, where students pull up a GAI model, they put in one query, they get some output, copy, paste, call it a day. So I think working through the log, this encourages critical thinking. And I think that's important because that's the piece that many of us are saying we're concerned is missing when students use GAI. They're not engaging in critical thinking. And I would argue that they can very much be engaged in critical thinking if they consider the process that they're going through in this collaboration with GAI. I think this helps to encourage classroom conversations about the roles GAI may or may not play in developing content. In which contexts might it be more useful than in other contexts? Discussions such as these. Finally, it helps to develop skills working with GAI, which is the point here, for future endeavors, and whether those endeavors be in the classroom or in the workplace. So students, we are preparing students to work with this technology. Okay, thank you very much.